All right, everybody, for the last video of this week, let's look at what we're going to be doing next week in week number 4. And this is around the type of source called the 100 Rules. So what are the 100 Rules and what can they tell us about medieval peasantry? That's what's the focus of this week. And even more importantly, this is your first writing assignment. This is your first source analysis you're going to be turning in. And it's going to be able to be a mixture of bringing in what you've learned for the past 3 weeks now for week number 4, and using what you've learned about the medieval peasantry, the terminology of who these peasants were, what a serf is, a villein, free, and so forth, and how that ties into what is written on these sources in the 100 Rule. Now, a big part when you're dealing with 100 rules, you're dealing with numbers, you're dealing with a lot of surveys and information, and you're going to have to do some calculations to help answer some of the questions. So it's really been historians working with the primary source to use that to find answers, to then write something about that. And that's using the sources big time. So, the best way I say to attack this, if this is your first time doing something like this, is to give yourself time. If you start feeling frustrated with trying to find it and trying to overwhelmed by some of the numbers that are on the page, take a step back, have a little chuckle, because I'm telling you right now that's going to maybe happen, and it's okay, but just attempt it, okay? Take your, maybe if you start feeling that way, go get a cup of coffee or tea or something and look at it again, and just try to work through it and read it and understand that the terminology and the way it's written is a little difficult, and just take it piecemeal, bit by bit. Write it down on the piece of paper, what numbers are there, what they represent, what do they mean, and as you answer the questions, it'll start to make more sense. It really should. A big part of this too is definitely reading the secondary sources first, because one thing, they're going to tell you what the 100 Rules are. They're going to tell you what this particular document is telling us, what it's about, what culture, and so what to get out of it when we're looking at peasants, when looking at the 100 Rules. And then when you look at the primary source, the 100 Rules that you're going to evaluate, it'll make a lot more sense. All right, so always start with the secondary sources in this case, and then take your time. The questions right there, there's 5 of them, I believe. Well, there's 5, but there's a few parts to some of them. And it gives you a brief idea of how many words to write for those. Altogether, this whole thing should be about 850 words. Please use the sources of the CMS Chicago Manual Style just to kind of get that experience of writing in that way. But put the numbers. So really, literally, questions 1 through 5, you don't have to put the whole question on there, but it's really so I know what you're writing about, and have that very clear and real organized for yourself. Makes it easier as well. And then when you answer each question, you can do that. Now, here's the thing. It's due in BART the day of our class, but that could be that evening. So what I really recommend is get it done in time, maybe even print out a copy or bring it to class, and we could discuss it. We could really get into it, embellish it, and understand each question. So if you're lost on one of the questions, don't fear. We could talk about it in the class, and we can get more information. So that way, if you need to tweak anything, make some changes, and then turn it in that evening, I recommend doing it that way. I think it's a good opportunity. I want you to have it done, so please bring it to class so I know that it's done, and turn it in on BART if you want to have it done then. But you can always make some changes after our class if you're thinking, man, I went a whole different direction on that question, I was way off. Then you could fix it. So you could use our seminar for this week to help make your grade even better. So I think that's an important thing to learn and grow in our classes, and if that helps you get a better grade, then that's wonderful. So so really work hard on these up before the class. I'd love to see them. If you remember, please answer 2 questions before the seminar. So bring in some questions so we can use those to enhance what you have questions about. Maybe even a concern or frustration or something you really thought was interesting that we want to dive in a little deeper. So in that part of our Ellie on this week's page where it says to post questions, please post 2 questions. I'd love to see those. I think that's a really important part of this. And and also collaborate. Don't forget about the the village hall that we have for this class. That's just strictly for you all to interact with each other. Maybe use that to bounce ideas off of. If you're struggling with the questions, be sure to help each other out. I think that's a big part of it. Now, what it's going to look like in class on next week, on week 4. A massive part of that is going to be going over this assignment, okay? But the first part is going to be to recap week number 3. So please bring in an image. So I'll say this in the writing, but be sure to bring in an image of what you found about the medieval peasants, and then also maybe bring in and be prepared to talk about what other stuff that's not in that image that we can understand now from the reading from week number 3 of what the image of the medieval peasant would look like. So we're going to take about 15 minutes or so to be able to look at the image of the peasants and to look at what life was like, and both through the image and through what we read in week number 3. All right, so 15 minutes or so going back, recapping the image of the medieval peasant, and then the rest of the time we're going to be looking at the 100 rules and what that has to say of understanding medieval peasantry. That's going to be week number 4, y'all. Looking forward to it.